In cryptography, X.509 is an ITU-T standard for a public key infrastructure and privilege management infrastructure. X.509 specifies, amongst other things, standard formats for public key certificates, certificate revocation lists, attribute certificates, and a certification path validation algorithm. History and usage. X.509 was initially issued on July 3, 1988 and was begun in association with the X.500 standard. It assumes a strict hierarchical system of certificate authorities for issuing the certificates. This contrasts with Web of Trust models, like PGP, where anyone may sign and thus attest to the validity of others' key certificates. Version 3 of X.509 includes the flexibility to support other topologies like bridges and meshes. It can be used in a peer-to-peer, open PGP like Web of Trust, but was rarely used that way as of 2004. The X.500 system has only ever been implemented by sovereign nations for state identity information sharing treaty fulfillment purposes, and the IETF's Public Key Infrastructure, or PKIX, working group has adapted the standard to the more flexible organization of the Internet. In fact, the term X.509 certificate usually refers to the IETF's PKIX certificate and CRL profile of the X.509 v3 certificate standard, as specified in RFC 5280, commonly referred to as PKIX for Public Key Infrastructure. Certificates. In the X.509 system, a certification authority issues a certificate binding a public key to a particular distinguished name in the X.500 tradition, or to an alternative name such as an email address or a DNS entry. An organization's trusted root certificates can be distributed to all employees so that they can use the company PKI system. Browsers such as Internet Explorer, Firefox, Opera, Safari and Chrome come with a predetermined set of root certificates pre-installed, so SSL certificates from larger vendors will work instantly. In effect, the browser's developers determine which CAs are trusted third parties for the browser's users. X.509 also includes standards for certificate revocation list implementations, an often neglected aspect of PKI systems. The IETF-approved way of checking a certificate's validity is the Online Certificate Status Protocol. Firefox 3 enables OCSP checking by default along with versions of Windows including Vista and later. Structure of a certificate. The structure foreseen by the standards is expressed in a formal language, namely Abstract Syntax Notation 1. The structure of an X.509 v3 digital certificate is as follows: certificate, version, serial number, algorithm ID, issuer, validity, not before, not after. Subject, subject public key info, public key algorithm, subject public key. Issuer unique identifier, subject unique identifier, extensions. Certificate signature algorithm, certificate signature. Each extension has its own ID, expressed as object identifier, which is a set of values, together with either a critical or non-critical indication. A certificate using system MUST reject the certificate if it encounters a critical extension that it does not recognize, or a critical extension that contains information that it cannot process. A non-critical extension may be ignored if it is not recognized, but MUST be processed if it is recognized. The structure of version 1 is given in RFC 1422. ITU-T introduced issuer and subject unique identifiers in version 2 to permit the reuse of issuer or subject name after some time. An example of reuse will be when a CA goes bankrupt and its name is deleted from the country's public list. After some time another CA with the same name may register itself, even though it is unrelated to the first one. However, IETF recommends that no issuer and subject names be reused. Therefore, version 2 is not widely deployed in the Internet. Extensions were introduced in version 3. A CA can use extensions to issue a certificate only for a specific purpose. Each extension can be critical or non-critical. If an extension is critical and the system processing the certificate does not recognize the extension or cannot process it, the system MUST reject the entire certificate. A non-critical extension, on the other hand, can be ignored while the system processes the rest of the certificate. In all versions, the serial number must be unique for each certificate issued by a specific CA. Extensions informing a specific usage of a certificate. RFC 5280 defines a number of certificate extensions which indicate how the certificate should be used. Most of them are ARCs from the Joint ISO CCITT 2, DS 5, ITSA 29, OID. Some of the most common, defined in Section 4.2.1, are basic constraints, ITSA 19, are used to indicate whether the certificate belongs to a CA. Key usage, ITSA 15, provides a bitmap specifying the cryptographic operations which may be performed using the public key contained in the certificate. For example, it could indicate that the key should be used for signatures but not for enkiphalment. Extended key usage, ITSA 37, is used, typically on a leaf certificate, to indicate the purpose of the public key contained in the certificate. It contains a list of OIDs, each of which indicates an allowed use. For example, ITPKI X.509 indicates that the key may be used on the server end of a TLS or SSL connection. ITPKI X.509 indicates that the key may be used to secure email. In general, if a certificate has several extensions restricting its use, all restrictions must be satisfied for a given use to be appropriate. RFC 5280 gives the specific example of a certificate containing both key usage and extended key usage. In this case, both must be processed and the certificate can only be used if both extensions are coherent in specifying the usage of a certificate. For example, NSS uses both extensions to specify certificate usage. Certificate file name extensions. Common file name extensions for X.509 certificates are PEMA base 64 encoded DER certificate, enclosed between begin certificate, and END certificate, chair, CRT, DER usually in binary DER form, but base 64 encoded certificates are common too. P7B, P7CA PKCS number 7 signed data structure without data, just certificate, S, or CRL, S, P12 PKCS number 12, may contain certificate, S, and private keys, PFX PFX, predecessor of PKCS number 12. PKCS number 7 is a standard for signing or encrypting data. Since the certificate is needed to verify signed data, it is possible to include them in the signed data structure. A P7C file is a degenerated signed data structure, without any data to sign. PKCS number 12 evolved from the Personal Information Exchange Standard and is used to exchange public and private objects in a single file. Sample X.509 certificates. This is an example of a decoded X.509 certificate for www.freeasoft.org, generated with OpenSSL. The actual certificate is about 1 KB in size. It was issued by Thought, as stated in the issuer field. Its subject contains many personal details, but the most important part is usually the common name, as this is the part that must match the host being authenticated. Also included is an RSA public key, followed by the signature, computed by taking a MD5 hash of the first part of the certificate and signing it using Thought's RSA private key. $OpenSL509 in FreeAsoft certificate PEMNet text, certificate, data, version, 1, serial number, 7829, signature algorithm, MD5 with rich encryption, issuer, C equals ZA, street equals Western Cape, L equals Cape Town, O equals Thought Consulting CC, OU equals Certification Services Division, CN equals Thought Server CA email address equals server-certs@thought.com, validity, not before, July 9, 160402 1998 GMT, not after, July 9, 160402 1999 GMT, subject, C equals US, street equals Maryland, L equals Pasadena, O equals Brent Bacala, OU equals Freesoft, CN equals www.freesoft.org/. Email address equal bacala@freesoft.org, subject public key info, public key algorithm, RSA encryption, RSA public key, modulus, 00. B43198-0A, C4, BC62C188 or DCBO, C8, BB, 333519D50C, 64B93D, 41B296FCF331E1, 6636D08E, 561244-75 EB81C, 9C, 5B, 66. 70335214C9, EC4F, 91517039-538517, 1694-6E, EAF4, D56F, D5, CAR B3475E, 1B, 0C, 7B, C5, CC2B, 6B, C190C3 1631-0D, BF7A, C74777, 8F, AO21C74C, DO166500C10F, D7, B880E3, D2756B, C1, A9E, 5C, 5C, A7D, C1, A110B CB8, E8351C, 9E, 27527E, 418F, exponent, 65537, signature algorithm, MD5 with rich encryption, 935F, 8F, 5F, C5, ARF-BF0A, AB56D, FB245F, B659-5D, 9D, 92-2E, 4A, 1B, 8B, AC7D, 9917-5D, CD19F6, ADF63-2F, 92, AD2F, 4B, CF0A, 1398-2C, 0E, 4303BF6, A8E, 9C, 67, DO, A24003F7, F6A, 1509-79A946 EDB716-1B, 4172, 0D, 19 or AD-DD9A, DF-AB975065. F55E, 85A6, F19D1, 5A, D9D, A63CDCBCC6D, 5D, O185B56D, C8, F3, D9, F7, 8F, 0E, FC-1F, 34E996-6E, 6C, CFF2, F9B, BF-B522, 68-9F. To validate this certificate, one needs a second certificate that matches the issuer of the first certificate. First, one verifies that the second certificate is of a CA kind. That is, that it can be used to issue other certificates. This is done by inspecting a value of the CA attribute in the X509b3 extension section. Then the RSA public key from the CA certificate is used to decode the signature on the first certificate to obtain a MD5 hash, which must match an actual MD5 hash computed over the rest of the certificate. An example CA certificate follows. $OpenSLEX509 in Thought Car Certificate PEMNet Text, Certificate, Data, Version, 3, Serial Number, 1, Signature Algorithm, MD5 with rich encryption, Issuer, C equals ZA, Street equals Western Cape, L equals Cape Town, O equals Thought Consulting CC, OU equals Certification Services Division, CN equals Thought Server CA email address equals server-certs@thought.com, validity, not before, August 1, 2000 1996 GMT, not after, December 31, 23:59:59 2020 GMT, subject, C equals ZA, Street equals Western Cape, L equals Cape Town, O equals Thought Consulting CC, OU equals Certification Services Division, CN equals Thought Server CA email address equals server-certs@thought.com, subject public key info, public key algorithm, RSA encryption, RSA public key, modulus, OO, D3, A456E, C8, FF566B, E6, CF5D, B6, A0C, 687547A2, or C2, DAR 8425 FCA8, F44751 DAR, 85, B5 2074 86. 1E, 0F, 75C9, E90861 F506, 6D, 36E, 151902 E952 CO62 DB4D, 999E, E2, 6A, 0C, 4438C D Fabi E36409 70C5, Fabi 16B, 29, B62F, 49C83B, D42704 2510 2F, E790, 6D. CO284299 D74C, 43C3, F5216D, 549F, 5D, C358E1, CO, E4, D95B, BO, B8, DCB47B, DF36, 3A, C2, B56622 D687 exponent, 65537, X509V3 extensions, X509V3 basic constraints, critical, CA, true, signature algorithm. MD5 with rich encryption, 07, FAR4C, 695C, FB95CC 46EA8583 4D, 2138E, CAR D9, A86F, 491A, E6, DAR 51E36076C, 846111A11A, C848, 3E, 59437D, 4F, 953D, A18B, B70B, 62987A, 758A, DD88. 4E, 4E, 9E, 40DBA8, CC3274B96F, 0D, C6, E3, B3440B, D9, 8A, 6F, 9A, 299B, 991828 3B, D1, E34028 9A, 5A, 3C, D5, B5, E721B, 8B, CAR A4, UP 8D, E951 D9, E24C, 2C, 59A9, DAR B9. B275 1B, F642 F2, FC7, F218 F989 BCA3, FF8A, 232E, 7047. This is an example of a self-signed certificate, as the issuer and subject are the same. There's no way to verify this certificate except by checking it against itself. Instead, these top-level certificates are manually stored by web browsers. Thought is one of the root certificate authorities recognized by both Microsoft and Netscape. This certificate comes with a web browser and is trusted by default. As a long-lived, globally trusted certificate that can sign anything, its matching private key has to be closely guarded. Security. There are a number of publications about PKI problems by Bruce Schneier, Peter Gutmann and other security experts. Certificate complexity. A majority of Internet users, either business or social, currently lack the basic ability, knowledge and willingness to effectively use cryptographic applications in a way that can successfully deter imminent threats. The complexity of this task is one of the weaknesses of public key cryptography. A lack of user-friendliness and overall usability thus affects solution efficacy. To deal with such issues, major software companies have included a bundle of root certificates, which have been audited for security purposes, into user browsers and operating systems. For the sake of user-friendliness and interoperability, all web browsers and operating systems currently contain this audited trusted root store of certificate issuing authorities. Certificates issued by these organizations, or their subordinate authorities, are transparently trusted by relying entities. These certificates are automatically deemed as secure and trustworthy, as opposed to those issued by a Euro-owing non-Euro issuers, which a relying party is warned not to trust. This interprets into certificates published by all authorities that have not been included in the root store. This approach attempts to make the provision of system security automatic and transparent, and essentially removes from the end user the decision-making process about the trustworthiness of web entities. The X.509 standard was primarily designed to support the X500 structure, but today's use cases center around the web. Many features are of little or no relevance today. The X509 specification suffers from being over-functional and underspecified, and the normative information is spread across many documents from different standardization bodies. Several profiles were developed to solve this, but these introduce interoperability issues and did not fix the problem. Architectural weaknesses: use of blacklisting invalid certificates instead of whitelisting. CRLs are notably a poor choice because of large sizes and convoluted distribution patterns, ambiguous OCSP semantics, and lack of historical revocation status. Revocation of root certificates is not addressed. Aggregation problem: identity claims, attribute claims, and policy claims are combined in a single container. This raises privacy, policy mapping, and maintenance issues. Delegation problem: CAs cannot technically restrict subordinate CAs from issuing certificates outside a limited namespaces or attribute set. This feature of X509 is not in use. Therefore, a large number of CAs exist on the Internet, and classifying them and their policies is an insurmountable task. Delegation of authority within an organization cannot be handled at all, as in common business practice. Federation problem: certificate chains that are the result of subordinate CAs, bridge CAs, and cross-signing make validation complex and expensive in terms of processing time. Path validation semantics may be ambiguous. The hierarchy with a third-party trusted party is the only model. This is inconvenient when a bilateral trust relationship is already in place. Problems with certificate authorities: the subject, not the relying party, purchases certificates. The subject will often utilize the cheapest issuer, so quality is not being paid for in the competing market. This is partly addressed by extended validation certificates. Certification authorities deny almost all warranties to the user. The expiration date should be used to limit the time the key strength is deemed sufficient. This parameter is abused by certification authorities to charge the client an extension fee. This places an unnecessary burden on the user with key rollover. Users use an undefined certification request protocol to obtain a certificate which is published in an unclear location in a non-existent directory with no real means to revoke it. Like all businesses, CAs are subject to the legal jurisdiction, S, of their site, S, of operation, and may be legally compelled to compromise the interests of their customers and their users. Intelligence agencies have also made use of false certificates issued through extralegal compromise of CAs, such as Diginota, to carry out man-in-the-middle attacks. Implementation issues: implementations suffer from design flaws, bugs, different interpretations of standards, and lack of interoperability of different standards. Some problems are: many implementations turn off revocation check, seen as obstacle, policies are not enforced. If it was turned on in all browsers by default, including code signing, it would probably crash the infrastructure. DNs are complex and little understood. RFC 822 name has two notations: name and policy constraints hardly supported, key usage ignored, first certificate in a list being used, enforcement of custom OIDs is difficult, attributes should not be made critical because it makes clients crash. Unspecified length of attributes lead to product-specific limits, exploits. MD2-based certificates were used for a long time and were vulnerable to primage attacks. Since the root certificate already had a self-signature, attackers could use this signature and use it for an intermediate certificate. In 2005, Arjun Lenstra and Ben de Weger demonstrated how to use hash collisions to construct two X509 certificates that contain identical signatures and that differ only in the public keys, achieved using a collision attack on the MD5 hash function. In 2008, Alexander Sotorov and Mark Stevens presented at the Chaos Communication Congress a practical attack that allowed them to create a rogue certificate authority, accepted by all common browsers, by exploiting the fact that RapidSSL was still issuing X509 certificates based on MD5. X.509 certificates based on SHA-1 had been deemed to be secure up until very recent times. In April 2009 at the Eurocrypt conference, Australian researchers at Macquarie University presented automatic differential path searching for SHA-1. The researchers were able to deduce a method which increases the likelihood of a collision by several orders of magnitude. EV certificates are of very limited help, because browsers do not have policies that disallow EV certificates. There are implementation errors with X.509 that allow, for example, falsified subject names using null-terminated strings or code injections attacks in certificates. By using illegal 0x80 padded sub-identifiers of object identifiers, wrong implementations, or by using integer overflows of the client's browsers, an attacker can include an unknown attribute in the CSR, which the CA will sign, which the client wrongly interprets as CN. Dan Kaminsky at the 26th Chaos Communication Congress Black OPs of PKI standards for X.509, PKCS7, Secure Sockets Layer, Cryptographic Protocols for Internet Secure Communications, Online Certificate Status Protocol/Certificate Revocation List. This is for validating proof of identity, PKCS12, used to store a private key with the appropriate public key certificate. Certification Authority. A certification authority is an entity which issues digital certificates for use by other parties. It is an example of a trusted third party. CAs are characteristic of many public key infrastructure schemes. There are many commercial CAs that charge for their services. Institutions and governments may have their own CAs, and there are free CAs. Public Key Infrastructure Working Group. The Public Key Infrastructure Working Group was a working group of the Internet Engineering Task Force dedicated to creating RFCs and other standard documentation on issues related to public key infrastructure based on X.509 certificates. PKIX was established in autumn 1995 in conjunction with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The working group was closed in November 2013. Protocols and standards supporting X.509 certificates, TLS-SSL, SMIME, IPsec, SSH, SmartCard, HTTPS, EAP, LDAP, Trusted Computing Group, Cable Labs, WS Security, XMPP, Microsoft Authenticode, OPCUA. See also, Abstract Syntax Notation 1, Certificate Policy, Certificate Server, Code Access Security, Computer Security, Communications Security, Digital Signature, Information Security, ISO/IEC, Public Key Cryptography, Timestamp Protocol, Trusted Time Stamping, Heartbleed, References. Additional reading, ITUT Recommendation X.509, Information Technology, Open Systems Interconnection, The Directory, Authentication Framework, 08/05. C. Adams, S. Farrell, Internet X.509 Public Key Infrastructure, Certificate Management Protocols, RFC 2510, March 1999, Hersley, R., W. Ford, W. Polk and D. Solo, Internet X.509 Public Key Infrastructure, Certificate and CRL Profile, RFC 3280, April 2002. Obsoleted by RFC 5280, obsoletes RFC 2459/updated by RFC 4325, RFC 4630. Hersley, R., W. Ford, W. Polk and D. Solo, Internet X.509 Public Key Infrastructure, Certificate and CRL Profile, RFC 2459, January 1999. Obsoleted by RFC 3280. Arjun Lenstra, Xiaoran Wang and Ben de Weger, on the possibility of constructing meaningful hash collisions for public keys, full version, with an appendix on colliding X.509 certificates, 2005, 1. External links, ITUT Recommendation X.509 Information Technology, Open Systems Interconnection, The Directory, Public Key and Attribute Certificate Frameworks, Peter Gutmann's articles, an overview of PKI, 3, X.509 Implementation Notes X.509 Style Guide, PKIX website, Enterprise Trust Integration and Web Services Security Standards and Demos, FAQ from RSA Labs, Sun Incorporated Secure Code Guidelines, RFC 4158, Internet X.509 Public Key Infrastructure, Certification Path Building, CSA Decoder and Certificate Decoder, can be used to decode and examine an encoded CSA or certificate. SSL Checker, can be used to test a certificate and that it has been installed correctly. CClib, X509 Decoder, decodes to an associative array whose keys correspond to X509's ASN1 description. Certificate Lookup, SSL tool that can be used to verify and troubleshoot X509 certificate installations or examine their contents. SSL Tools Manager for Windows, Windows utility to create X509 certificates for IIS or Exchange. Website with a free, graphical X509 Builder tool for Windows.